Eclipses in History. This is a compendium of astrological eclipse charts and world events with 7 case studies drawn from the historical record, together with a working reference of eclipse mechanics, a master table of notable eclipses, a Saros series quick reference, and a glossary of terms. And this compendium presents astrology as historical interpretive tradition, as sign placements and symbolic readings reflect that tradition, are not offered as scientifically validated claims, so dates, locations, and historical outcomes are drawn from the historical and astronomical record. Before we get started with this video, I want to say thank you, quick shout out to AI Agent Claude Anthropic for helping craft this, and Report Labs as well for the PDF creation. And let's get started. We have a lot to talk about. So this is a quick forward on what we're going into. So long before eclipses could be predicted by calculation, they were read as messages, sudden interruptions of the ordinary sky, arriving at moments that observers could not help but connect to the affairs unfolding around them. This compendium gathers 7 such moments, spanning 25 centuries, in which a solar or lunar eclipse coincided with a documented turn in human affairs. A war's end, a siege's climax, an empire's opening, a scientific information. 2 guides of material are woven together in what follows, and the book tries to keep them clearly distinct. The first is historical, dates, locations, and outcomes, drawn from the astronomical and documentary record, verifiable independent of any interpretive framework. The second is astrological, the traditional symbolic meanings assigned to zodiac signs, lunar nodes, and eclipse families offered here as a body of interpretive practice with its own long history, not as an empirical account of cause and effect. Readers approaching this material as students of history, of astrology, or of both should find the boundary between the two easy to locate throughout. And we see that part 1 introduces the mechanics of eclipses and the basic vocabulary astrologers use to read them. Part 2 presents the 7 case studies in chronological order, each with a schematic chart wheel, a data summary, the historical record, and the traditional astrological reading associated with it. Part 3 collects reference material, a master table of additional notable eclipses, a quick reference guide, a Saros series, and a glossary of terms used throughout. Here are the contents. We're going to look at the forward. We already did that. Now, why eclipses happen. Solar and lunar eclipses in practice. Reading an eclipse chart, the Saros cycle. Also looking at the eclipse of Thales, the eve of Gaugamela, the anarchy begins, the fall of Constantinople, Columbus and the Jamaican eclipse, the eclipse that confirmed relativity, the Great American Eclipse. Appendix A is Master and Table of Notable Eclipses. Appendix B is Saros Series Quick Reference, and Appendix C on Method and Sources, as well as a glossary. So part 1 is the mechanics of eclipses. We're going to talk about why eclipses happen. Before we get started, I'm just going to do something really quick. Alright, so why do eclipses happen? An eclipse is at its simplest a shadowy event. We see a solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes directly between the sun and earth, blocking some or all of the sun's light from a given location. A lunar eclipse occurs at the opposite point in the moon cycle, when earth passes between the sun and a full moon and casts its own shadow across the lunar surface. Because the moon's orbit is tilted about 5 degrees relative to Earth's path around the sun, these alignments do not happen at every new and full moon, only when the moon is also near one of the 2 points where its orbit crosses the ecliptic known as the lunar nodes. This is the astronomical fact underlying the astrological emphasis on the nodal axes. An eclipse can only occur near a lunar node, so every eclipse chart carries a node placement as one of its defining features alongside the sun-moon alignment itself. And we see solar and lunar eclipses in practice. Total solar eclipse is visible only along a narrow path across Earth's surface, often just tens of miles wide, and lasts at most a few minutes of totality at any one location. A total lunar eclipse, by contrast, is visible from an entire hemisphere of Earth at once, and can last well over an hour. This practical difference shaped how the two were historically observed and recorded. Lunar eclipses were witnessed by whole cities and armies, while total solar eclipses tended to be documented by whoever happened to stand in a narrow band of totality. So reading an eclipse chart, we notice that an eclipse chart is simply a chart cast for the exact moment of the eclipse for a chosen location, typically the place where the event of interest occurred. Astrologers reading such a chart typically attend to a handful of features. The zodiac sign of the eclipse, taken as the dominant symbolic theme, since the sun and moon share a single degree at the moment of alignment. The nearby lunar node, Rahu suggesting a theme of opening or advance, and Ketu, a theme of closure or release. Any classical planet or closely aligned with the eclipse degree that is coloring or complicating the eclipse's basic theme. In the sidereal series to which the eclipse belongs, treated by some practitioners as carrying a recurring thread across the 12th to 13th century life of the series. And the sidereal cycle, which is roughly every 18 years, 11 days and 8 hours, the sun, moon, and lunar nodes return to nearly the same relative geometry, producing an eclipse closely related to one 18 years earlier. Similar in character but shifted about 120 degrees in longitude around Earth and about 11 degrees further along the zodiac. A full sidereal series tracing this drift from its first faint partial eclipse to its last typically spans 12 to 13 centuries and around 70 to 80 eclipses. So that's a lot to go over, and here we're going to look at the sidereal cycle. So each eclipse in the series falls about 11 degrees further along the zodiac, roughly 18 years apart. Schematic of a sidereal series, so each successive eclipse in the family is offset by roughly 11 degrees of zodiacal longitude and arrives about 18 years after the last. So we'll notice that the first eclipse is right here, second eclipse, third eclipse, fourth, fifth, and the sixth, all the way off the chart. So here we're looking at the 7 case studies in chronological order, 7 eclipses, 7 turning points. The eclipse of the Eve of Cow, the Anarchy, BE, the Fall of Co, Columbus and T, the Eclipse TH, and the Great Murder. So let's look at the eclipse of Thales. Solar eclipse of May 28th, 585 BCE, sign of Gemini traditional. So we see the date, as well as the type, as well as the zodiac sign traditional. We see the location, and we notice the sidereal series. So schematic eclipse wheel for the eclipse of Thales. In the historical record, we're going to look at this. For 5 years, the Medes and the Lydians had fought an inconclusive war along the Hales frontier. According to Herodotus, the two armies met for a six-pitched battle when daylight suddenly failed. A West struck both sides, broke off fighting on the spot, and within the year sealed a peace sworn over a shared meal and a marriage alliance. The Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus was later credited with having predicted the eclipse, an event historians still treat as the earliest precisely dated occurrence in Western history. The astrological reading. Traditional astrology reads the Gemini eclipse as falling in a sign of dialogue, treaties, and exchange of information and apt signature. Later commentators have suggested for an event that ended a war through sudden communication rather than conquest. The eclipse is presented here as the archetypal case of a peace eclipse, one that arrives at the climax of conflict and precipitates a negotiated close. We notice that the North Node was in Aquarius, with the South Node Ketu in Leo. And now we look at the eve of Gaugamela, the lunar eclipse of September 20th, 331 BCE in the sign of Pisces traditionally. So again, we have the date, the type, zodiac sign, location, as well as sidereal series. And this is the schematic eclipse wheel for the eve of Gaugamela. We see that the midheaven is Aquarius with the North Node in Leo. So the historical record here. 11 nights before Alexander the Great met Darius III of Persia in the decisive Battle of Gaugamela, a total lunar eclipse darkened the sky over the Macedonian camp. Ancient historians record that Alexander's soothsayers read the sign as favorable to the Macedonians and unfavorable to the Persians, setting the army's nerve before the battle that would open the whole of the Persian Empire to Alexander. So the astro reading, a lunar eclipse in watery Pisces is traditionally associated with the dissolving of an old order and the surfacing of hidden currents, read by later astrologers as fitting the twilight of a centuries-old Achaemenid empire on the eve of its final defeat. Here we see the anarchy begins, the total solar eclipse of August 2nd, 1133, sign of Leo. Traditionally, we get the date, type, zodiac sign, traditional location, and we see the Cero series. So this is the schematic eclipse wheel for the anarchy begins. We notice this time Sagittarius, Ketu, Rahu, Gemini, with that solar eclipse in Leo. So for the historical record, English chroniclers recorded a total solar eclipse so dark that stars appeared at midday and connected it directly to King Henry I's departure for Normandy that same summer, a voyage from which he never returned alive. His death 2 years later without a male heir triggered a 19-year civil war between his daughter Matilda and his nephew Stephen, remembered by English historians as the Anarchy. The astro reading here we see Leo, the sign of kingship, and the divine self, made this eclipse a natural touchstone for medieval chroniclers already primed to read solar darkness as an omen against a reigning monarch. Popular memory dubbed it King Henry's eclipse, a label historians still use precisely because the association was made so quickly after the fact. And here we see the fall of Constantinople with a total lunar eclipse, night of May 22nd, 1453, the sign of Sagittarius traditionally, date, type, traditional zodiac sign, location, as well as Cero series. So here's that schematic eclipse wheel for the fall of Constantinople. We notice that the north node is in Aquarius and the midheaven Leo, with the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. So for the historical record, an old prophecy held that Constantinople, founded under a full moon, could never fall while the moon shone whole. On the night of May 22nd, 1453, with Ottoman forces already at the walls, the full moon rose and was followed by a total lunar eclipse, leaving the besieged city in darkness for hours. Morale inside the walls collapsed. The final assault came 6 nights later, ending the 11th century Byzantine Empire. In the astro reading, a Sagittarian eclipse is traditionally tied to belief systems, foreign campaigns, and long horizons, themes that converged starkly in a siege, whose outcome was read by besiegers and besieged alike through the frame of prophecy and faith rather than tactics alone. And Columbus and the Jamaican eclipse. Total lunar eclipse of February 29th, 1504. With the zodiac sign traditionally being Virgo. Location, St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica, in the Cero series 111. But here's the schematic eclipse wheel for Columbus and the Jamaican eclipse. We notice that the midheaven is in Aquarius, the north node in Leo, and lunar eclipse in Virgo. So for the historical record, stranded in Jamaica with a starving crew and a hostile local population, Christopher Columbus consulted his ephemeris and found a lunar eclipse due on February 29th, 1504. He warned the Taino chiefs that his god was angry and would blot out the moon in punishment. When the eclipse arrived on schedule, provisioning resumed at once, a textbook case of astronomical prediction used as diplomatic leverage. And the astro reading, Virgo's traditional association with practical calculation, provisioning, and service sits. Astrologers have noted, at an ironic angle to an event remembered chiefly as an act of coercion dressed in the language of prophecy. Someone said I'm famous. Nobody knows who I am, though, so I'm not famous. I'm not making any fucking money. The eclipse that confirmed relativity. We see the total solar eclipse of May 29th, 1919, sign of Gemini traditionally. I'm on Meet Me Live, and someone just came in my comments saying, dude from earlier showed you are made, you famous. I don't know. I have to complete this video, though. I'm not even near done. We're on page 13. Alright, so for the schematic eclipse wheel, for the eclipse that confirmed relativity, we noticed that the north node Rahu was again in Aquarius, the south node Ketu in Leo, and the solar eclipse in Gemini, May 29th, 1919. The location, principal West Africa, in Sao Paulo, Brazil with the Cero Series 136. So essentially here, notice that expeditions led by Arthur Eddington photographed starlight bending around the darkened sun during this eclipse, providing the first strong observational support for Einstein's general theory of relativity. The announcement made Einstein a global celebrity almost overnight, and is widely cited as one of the 20th century's defining scientific moments. The astro reading here. Gemini eclipse tied to communication, measurement, and the exchange of ideas. Cross distance is a fitting frame commentators have suggested for an event that was itself about proving how light information bends and travels across the world. Alright, the Great American Eclipse. Total solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017, the sign of Leo. And we noticed that this occurred with the continental United States coast to coast in Cero Series Ceros 145. The North Node in Gemini. And South Node Ketu in Sagittarius, solar eclipse in Leo. So we noticed that the first total solar eclipse to cross the entire continental US since 1918 drew an estimated tens of millions of viewers along its path, becoming a major shared cultural and media event. Falling within Ceros 145, the same family that would produce the eclipse of 2045, it is frequently cited by contemporary astrologers as a marker for a period of intense public focus on national identity and leadership in the US. And the astro reading, occurring in Leo, sign of sovereign public figures and national spectacle. This eclipse is commonly discussed in popular astrology as symbolically tied to debates over leadership, collective identity that intensified in the US during the surrounding years. A reading offered here as an illustration of contemporary interpretive practice, not as a claim of causation. However, I have to mention in like most of my videos, it's not necessarily astrology as cause and effect. It's more like there is methods to this shit, there's layers to this shit, and if you're not actually going to dive deep and learn about them, then of course it's not going to seem like it makes any sense. Alright? So part 3 is the reference material here. And for the first appendix, it's a master table of notable eclipses. So an extended list of historically notable eclipses beyond the 7 case studies for reference, with entries marked with an asterisk, carried dispute, or approximate dating. And we see the dagger marks an entry included for calendar context, although the associated celestial sign was a comet rather than an eclipse. So we see, for example, October 22nd, we see that there was a solar eclipse with no traditional sign, no Cero Series, but the associated event is the earliest suspected eclipse record. Chinese oracle bone, coordinals, and date disputed in 2136 BCE. We noticed that May 28th, 585 BCE, there was a solar eclipse in Gemini with the Cero Series 63. The Battle of the Helios halted, and the Middle-Lydian War ended. September 20th, 331 BCE, the lunar eclipse in Pisces, Cero 6060. 11 nights before the Battle of Gaugamela. Cero cycle 60. This was 11 nights before the Battle of Gaugamela. And 15th of March, 44 BCE, the assassination of Julius Caesar. A comet, non-eclipse, it was a period of noted celestial signs of no type, no sign, traditional, no Cero Series. And August 2nd of 1133, solar eclipse in Leo, Cero cycle 121, King Henry I of England departing for Normandy, and he actually died in 1135, sparking the anarchy. May 22nd in 1453, there was a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, Cero cycle 121, 6 nights before the fall of Constantinople. So as we can see, it's like a complete historiography here of the notable eclipses. Historiography, I think I'm saying it right. February 29th, 1504, the lunar eclipse in Virgo, Cero cycle 111. We saw Christopher Columbus's stranded expedition in Jamaica. November 30th, 1667, solar eclipse in Sagittarius, 128 for the Cero cycle, cited in early modern almanacs amid plague and fire recovery in London. April 1st, 1764, there was a solar eclipse in Aries, the Cero cycle 108, showing colonial-era American almanac eclipse, widely observed and recorded. September 7th in 1858, there's a solar eclipse in Virgo. Not sure what the Saros cycle was, but Donati's comet year, eclipse widely reported in the press alongside comet observations. May 29th in 1919, the solar eclipse in Gemini, Saros cycle 136, Eddington expedition, observational confirmation of general relativity. July 20th, 1963, is solar eclipse in Cancer, with the Saros cycle being 145, widely observed across North America during the Cold War era. August 11th, 1999, solar eclipse in Leo, 145 being the Saros cycle, last total solar eclipse of the 20th century crossing Europe and South Asia. So there's a lot here. In fact, I may have more. Actually, I don't. Okay. I thought I might have. But August 21st, 2017, the solar eclipse in Leo, Saros cycle 145, first coast-to-coast U.S. total eclipse since 1918. December 14th, 2020, there's a solar eclipse in Sagittarius, Saros cycle 121, with the total eclipse over South America during the COVID-19 pandemic year. And April 8th of 2024, there was a solar eclipse in Aries. The Saros cycle was 139. We saw a total eclipse across North America, widely covered eclipse of the decade. So those are just a few events in history. The solar and lunar eclipses. And also, I wanted to do another appendix for Saros series quick reference. And that looks like a short reference to the Saros series cited elsewhere in this compendium. So solar and lunar Saros series are numbered independently, so a shared number between a solar and a lunar entry is coincidental rather than indicating a family relationship. And we see here that we're going to look at the series, the type, the active period, as well as the notes. It's not going to be too very long. So the Saros 60, the type is lunar. Active period is active in classical antiquity, and the notes we have are associated in this compendium with the eve of Gaugamela, which occurred in 331 BCE. Saros 63, type is solar, active in classical antiquity. This one is associated in this compendium with the eclipse of Thales, which occurred in 585 BCE. Saros 111, lunar, active 12th through 16th century approximately, and is associated in this compendium with the 1504 Jamaica eclipse. Saros 121 is mixed, long-running series, medieval modern, and we see it cited for both the 1133 solar eclipse and per tradition. Later family members, solar and lunar Saros numbering are independent series that share a number coincidentally. Saros 128 is solar, 17th to 18th century epochs, cited for the 1667 eclipse noted in early modern almanacs. Saros 136 is solar, 20th century ended 2091, estimating. Produced the 1919 relativity eclipse and the 1937, 1955, 1973 members of the same family. Saros 139 is solar, active 20th to 21st century. It produced the 2024 North American total eclipse, and we see Saros 145 is solar, active 20th to 21st century. It produced the 1999 and 2017 total eclipses, and it will next produce a total eclipse in 2035, which I might make a video completely about that eclipse, because I do think it's going to be revolutionary. Alright, so now we're going to talk about method and sources here for Appendix C. Now this is just valuable information. If you actually want to learn astrology, I suggest that you take note of what I'm saying here, because all of history shows, especially with warfare, and that's why I make videos about like analyzing certain global events, especially with midpoints and orbs and malefic aspects. And we can get into more detail about whether the planet was stationary, retrograde, whether it was in the pre-shadow, post-shadow, all these factors. But specifically for eclipses, I want to give you these methods and sources used for what we just discussed, okay? Very important. Historical dates and outcomes in this compendium are drawn from the documentary and historiographical record for each event. We see classical historians Herodotus, Arrian, and their successors for the ancient cases, medieval chronicles for the anarchy and the fall of Constantinople, Columbus's own logs, and later biographies for the Jamaica episode, published record of the 1919 Eddington expedition, and the 2017 eclipses media coverage for the modern cases. So it's just doing a lot of research and noticing how astrology ties into, and has always tied into, global events. You know? Zodiac sign placements for eclipses before the era of precise published ephemerides are given as traditional attributions rather than independently recalculated positions and are marked traditional by trad throughout to flag this. And Saros series numbers for ancient eclipses likewise follow conventional retrospective attribution rather than a claim of contemporary record keeping, since the Saros cycle itself was not formally named and tracked as a series until much later. The astrological readings offered for each case are drawn from traditional and widely circulated interpretive conventions. So the association of Leo with sovereignty, which it still is technically because Leo is, a very prideful sign. It's curated by the sun, and Leo, therefore, here's the thing. When you have sun in Leo, moon in Leo, or Leo rising, because it's curated by the sun, you are naturally going to be drawn in to dealing with a lot of people. That could be performing in your fucking school orchestra. Regardless, you're performing. That is Leo. You will be on stage. You will be showing a talent that you have. And that's naturally what the sun is doing with the sign. But anyways, Gemini with communication and so forth, rather than from any single name source, and are presented as illustrations of how astrologers have historically approached these events rather than as claims that the sign placements cause the outcomes described. Alright. And here's a glossary of the terms used throughout this compendium, arranged alphabetically. I like to use a glossary in every single video to help you guys understand exactly what I'm trying to say here. Angle, angular house. It's one of the 4 cardinal points of a chart, whether it's the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, and imum coli, traditionally treated as positions of heightened importance. We see the ascendant is a zodiac degree rising on the eastern horizon at a given moment and place, the starting point of the first house in most house systems. Conjunction is an alignment in which 2 bodies, such as the sun and moon at an eclipse, occupy the same or nearly the same zodiacal degree. Eclipse family is an informal term for the sequence of eclipses belonging to the same Saros series, treated by some astrologers as sharing a recurring symbolic theme. An eclipse season is a roughly 34 to 36 day window, occurring about every 6 months, during which the sun's passage near a lunar node makes 1 or more eclipses possible. The ecliptic is the apparent annual path of the sun across the celestial sphere and the reference plane from which zodiacal longitude is measured. What is a ephemeris? A published table of the calculated positions of celestial bodies at regular intervals used to construct charts for any given date. Lunar eclipse, an alignment in which the Earth passes between the sun and a full moon, casting its shadow on the moon, astrologically read as a culmination of bringing of hidden matters into visibility. Alright, lunar nodes. Talk about these in like every video, but here we go again because I'm going to keep on going. Not stopping until you learn astrology for free. The 2 points where the moon's orbital path crosses the ecliptic. What is Rahu? It's the north node. It's traditionally associated with growth and new direction. And Ketu is the south node with release and familiar patterns. And we know that eclipses occur only near the nodal axes. Okay? Mundane astrology. The branch of astrological practice. It's concerned with nations, rulers, collective events, as distinct from the charts of individuals, which is natal astrology, okay? Rectified astrology. You can even rectify an event. So technically natal astrology is specifically for individuals, as well as synastry, Davidson charts for relationships, composites. Orb is the permitted margin of degrees within which an alignment is still considered active or exact enough to count. Retrograde is the apparent backward motion of a planet through the zodiac, as seen from Earth. So it's an optical effect of relative orbital speeds. Now here's the thing. A lot of scientists, like people that call themselves scientists, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye the Science Guy, they're going to sit up here and say, astrology is not real. Planets going retrograde, Mercury's going retrograde, that's not real. You guys have been alive for how long, and you haven't studied astrology at all? Really? You're going to sit here and call yourself a scientist, though. How dare you? Honestly, how dare you? How dare you call yourself a scientist? You can't even fucking be asked to actually be a scientist. Astrology is science. The planets are science. The fixed stars are science. The aspects, the orbs, magnitude, everything in astrology all ties back to science. But these quote-unquote scientists, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye, I've watched them talk about astrology and call it a facade, call it fake. So I think that they don't know what they're talking about. But anyways, we're going to continue going here. And we see that the zero cycle is a period of approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, after which the sun, moon, and lunar nodes return to nearly the same relative geometry, producing a closely related eclipse. Zero series is the complete family of eclipses spaced one zero cycle apart, typically lasting 12 to 13 centuries and comprising 70 or more eclipses from first to last. Solar eclipse is an alignment in which the moon passes between the sun and Earth, blocking some or all of the sun's light, astrologically read as an abrupt new beginning or a reset. Syzygy is the technical term for any straight line alignment of three celestial bodies encompassing both the new moon conjunction and full moon opposition that underlie solar and lunar eclipses. Totality is the period during a total solar eclipse when the moon fully covers the sun's disk, not dusk, or during a total lunar eclipse when the moon is fully within Earth's darkest shadow, which is the umbra. Transit is the ongoing movement of a planet through the zodiac considered in relation to a fixed chart, such as an eclipse chart or a person's birth chart. Umbra and penumbra. The umbra is the darkest central part of a shadow, producing totality. The penumbra is the lighter outer shadow, producing a partial eclipse. Tropical zodiac. The belt of 12 30-degree signs used in most Western astrology, measured from the point of the March equinox rather than from fixed background stars. Right. Now, that was Eclipses in History, a compendium of astrological eclipse charts and world events. I hope you learned something from this video with peace and love. This is composed and was composed as a reference and teaching document. Astrological readings are traditional, interpretive material, not empirical claims. Subscribe, like, comment, share if you dare, and care with peace and love. And I'll see you in the next one teaching you more astrology for free. Piscean out.